When people ask me, what's so special about First Baptist on Fifth? I answer quickly. It's not our building, though lovely, or our worship, though meaningful, not our gatherings, though life-giving, or even our missions and ministries in the world, though impactful. The very best part of First on Fifth? Our people, hands down. In our Confession of Identity, we said this of our community. Here, you'll see retirees and families with rambunctious little ones, teenagers discovering their identities, middle-agers juggling all the demands of this season, young people navigating adulthood for the first time, and seniors rich in wisdom and encouragement. You can read our fiery op-eds in the paper, pass us moving about on the city streets, see us building ramps for the underserved, catch us finding beauty in our gardens and on hiking trails, and experience us taking delight in the world. At the core of our community, we are folks who love each other well. And at the core of our life together, we share in meaningful conversation about what it means to live and love in this world. That's what you'll hear and who you'll hear from in our new podcast series called Life Together. Each episode will be hosted by one of our ministers and will feature a conversation with one or two or even several of our beloved church members. They'll answer a handful of questions about their story, about objects or artifacts that represent their journey, about questions or doubts they wrestle with, and why they are a member, and finally, what gives them hope. As you listen to their wisdom and laughter, their audacious hope and abundant love, I trust you'll be as inspired and moved as I am on the regular. T.S. Eliot once asked, "What life have you if you have not life together?" Join us this season for Life Together.
Hello and welcome to the First Baptist on Fifth Life Together podcast series. My name is Kyle Caudle. I'm the Associate Pastor of Youth Missions and Adult here at First Baptist on Fifth. Thank you for listening, and we are so glad to have Art and Terri Yates in conversation with us today. I first met Art and Terri in a class that I started here called the Conversations class. It's a class that's still going, but this was in the early days. I want to say that was 2015, 2016. Does that sound about right?
That's about right.
Yeah. We may talk about that class a little more later in our conversation, but I just remember that as the kind of the first time that I met both of you. And I feel like I interact with you a lot more now than I even did then, but that's good. Terri is a runner, and you're, I think, planning on running 10 miles this weekend. Did I hear that? Oh, man. And as an academic leader and on the church end of things is a fearless capital campaign leader. I guess all capital campaign leaders have to be fearless in some kind of way. And Art, I've said about you that you are running for Volunteer of the Year here at First Baptist on Fifth. You and Gary Knight are in a close kind of tie, except I think you get a little less recognition for what you do. Is that right?
No recognition at all would be ideal for me.
Okay.
I don't do recognition for things like that.
And the more I learn about you, Art, the more I find out that you've done everything. Does that sound about right?
I've been in enough trouble.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes. So he has a background in IT. I found out you used to play bass and did a music thing for a while.
For a while, yes, many years.
Yeah.
Gave it up to get married. What can I say?
Well, here we are. So we'll, as we continue this conversation together and get this going, I wanted to first focus on story. So part of our life together, both as our series, as a church, as this podcast series, is talking about stories, both our stories individually, our stories as friends, as families, as a church community. So thinking about you both, and you could get whoever wants to kind of pick up with this, but could you tell your story, thinking about the people maybe, or the places, or the season of life that has most powerfully shaped you, for good or maybe not so good, but that kind of shaped your understanding of God and yourself?
I'll start. My story starts in that I grew up with my mom and dad at a children's home. My dad was in administration, and so I grew up with 300 other kids. And going to church, it was always like Youth Sunday. because there were so many kids in the church. And I think I realized probably when I was in middle school that I was what maybe people would say was different, because I lived with my parents and they didn't. And so at that time, I began to feel a little ostracized by the youth group, and so stepped out of a lot of church activities at that time. And so went to college at Wake Forest and was just going like, what is my faith? Who am I? What do I believe in? And immediately got connected into Baptist Student Union and met Ed Chrisman and David Fouché. And Ed Chrisman's probably had one of the most profound impacts in terms of my Christian journey. I think probably a lot of Wake Foresters would say that about Ed, and learned what it meant to be the hands and feet of Christ. And from there, just began my journey. And during the summer between my freshman and sophomore year at Wake, I worked at Ridgecrest for a summer.
Yeah.
So that was fun in terms of bringing together a lot of different young people my age, and we all were experiencing what does it mean to be a Christian at that time. So that was probably when my faith journey began. And then, peaks and valleys along the way, but I look back to those years at Wake Forest as being cornerstone.
Yeah. So when you mentioned Chrisman, there's a local restaurant. Have you seen the poster? It's Mama Zoe's. Do you ever go there? It's on Renolda. But there's there's a poster of Chrisman, has his face on it, and it says Christ Man.
Christ Man.
Which is pretty great last name for someone to kind of introduce you to the depths of the Christian faith. So very neat. What about you, Art? What were some parts of your story?
Mine's not nearly as elegant. Let's see. I generally go back to my paternal grandparents. Yates in Baptist lore is kind of larger than life. Go back to Matthew Tyson Yates, who was the first Southern Baptist missionary to China. So we're talking 1830s to 1880s, and his shadow has been kind of over the family ever since then, which is good. And then it's extremely hard to keep up with such a towering figure. My grandparents were old enough to know the legacy from their parents firsthand, and you've got Baptist Association down east that's named after him, a church after him. So it's like, well, you're expected to carry on the legacy each generation. And each generation further removed, we just don't do as good a job, I would say. But I was introduced to that probably at 7 or 8 years old. And by my grandparents. My grandfather always led the singing at Pittsburgh Baptist Church, and my grandmother played the piano, and they were always involved in the church. And then all my uncles, they all had a bluegrass band, so Saturday night fun and repent on Sunday kind of thing. So I learned my musical roots there, and then, like I said, introduced to our faith. And then along through high school years, when my father passed away, he was my freshman year in college, and that was pretty devastating to me personally. And God and I decided that I wasn't going to be very good, and he was going to be patient.
Okay.
So I went through my emaciations in the music industry and everything else, and came out the other side barely alive. And then I met this one here, and she kind of straightened me out.
Okay.
30 years.
Yeah, 30.
Life together right there, 30
My grandfather wore this 60 years, so I got 30 more to go.
So that's an inherited ring.
I see it every morning. I see it every evening. And I remember what he always told me about how I should be and how I should act, and both in marriage and in faith. So
did he have any like phrases or like things that stood out to you that you still kind of repeat?
Yeah, but I'm not going to say them here.
Any like church appropriate?
No.
We can beep it out like if we need.
Well, pretty much behave yourself, and and
Uh-huh.
do what you're trained and what you're supposed to do.
Sure.
good friend of mine, Tim Craven, when he was elected deacon, had his ordination many years ago. The community we lived in, Wahlberg, he said we were all compelled to come to Christ. We were more compelled because that's what our families, our community, and all kind of expected of us. So as when you're compelled, it's not the big lightning strike thing that a lot of people say, but you can grow once you've reached that threshold, and that's kind of where everything's gone since I guess I was a teenager.
Yeah.
And ups and downs, but I've been trying to do what I should, and I think I've done pretty good. You have to ask the boss.
Yeah. And it's interesting because when we got married, Art chose to wear his grandfather's wedding band, and I chose to wear my grandmother's wedding band.
Okay.
It was my dad's mom, and so she was just a special person to me. So we both have that in terms of our background.
And was there any ways that she influenced your faith life?
I think yes. I remember her telling us a story because they grew up in a small town in southern Illinois, and when she got married to, we called her Mimi. When Mimi got married to my D-Dad, they kept it secret because she was working at the bank. And the bank owner said he was going to fire any woman who got married. So they kept their marriage secret. But D-Dad had been married before. It was a short-lived marriage right when he got out of high school, no children. And so as a result, in their church in Harrisburg, he could never be a deacon. Okay. But my grandmother told us the story about how her father, my great-grandfather, led my D-Dad to Christ. And that was so important to her. And so I knew that was part of their family and their faith growing up. And so I just knew that from an early age. I mean, when we go to see my grandparents, we went to church with them. When we went to church sometimes with my mom growing up, I don't remember going to church with her parents, but I do remember going to church all the time with my dad's parents.
It was similar in my family. My grandparents had to be secretly married because in North Carolina, if you were a teacher, you could be married female. And at that time, this is the late 20s, early 30s.
I'm learning all kinds of things about marriage and workplaces that I didn't even know was possible.
Early at 1900.
Yeah.
They kept it a secret for several years. And then all the yearbooks I've seen since then, she was never Dorothy Yates. She was always Mrs. Carl Yates. You were always addressed publicly or even in a yearbook by your husband's name. It's not like you had a identity. Now, can you imagine this one here only being called Mrs. Art Yates?
Times have changed. Sometimes for better, though, right? Yeah.
For better.
Yeah, that's good. So one thing that, like, hearing both of you, it seems like family of origin and just their kind of, whether that's great-great-granddad was some missionary that was like cast a long shadow, yeah, or this grandma that was just this kind of presence in your life that was steady. You shared kind of how that was important as young adults, maybe as that led into college. What about when you two met later? Was there something, was that like in church life, or did you meet somewhere else and that was an important part that you were like, hey,
No, we met at church.
Okay.
We met at church, and I think he said I was thumping a song on my Bible, which I probably was.
We were both
what song?
We were both listening to the same radio station when we came in.
So I was over there in Sunday school, like beating the tune on my Bible. Art says, "What are you doing?" Like, I've got this tune in my head that I heard on the way to church. So we met at church. We married at that church. Isabel was born when we were at that church. She was dedicated there, and she was baptized there. His mom was her memorial service was there, and so we have a lot of history We met at church. Our family started at this church and everything, at a previous church. And so, yeah, I mean, it's always been a part of who we are and who we have. When we raised Isabel.
Yeah.
The same minister that married us married Isabel and Tyler
Uh-huh.
first of the year, so it's kind of come more full circle
Yeah.
each time. That's been the integral part of our relationship. And then working inside the church in various things. Again, compelled. That's kind of what you did. You went to church, but you also served Christ through your working with the church.
Yeah.
Me, I like the low profile behind the scenes things, and then we let her get all the big flashy stuff.
Yeah. Art, I think about you every day because you painted my office, before I moved in. So I'm just really grateful for this paint in here. But even though you've told me painting's not your favorite thing, but you love to do it here. Is that right?
I'll do it for the Lord. I won't do it anywhere else.
Okay. Yeah. There's got to be a little bit of suffering in discipleship, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, just a little bit. So you've already kind of talked a little bit about some symbols that are important to you, both in your wedding rings, because these got passed down, and they represent not only your commitment to one another, but also this kind of heritage that's kind of been handed on to you. Are there any other objects or artifacts maybe that represent your journey of life and faith, and what might that be?
So I'd have to pick up my running shoes.
Yeah.
I've been a runner for a long time, and probably somewhere around 12, 13 years ago, when I was training for my first half marathon, I was like, golly, how do I get through these 10, 13 miles? And I read an article about having a prayer list, like every mile, have a list of people you're going to pray for. And it was very deliberate, and I'd get to like mile 3 and I'm like, who am I supposed to pray for? Or who am I supposed to pray for? But now it just comes so easy. I like to run in the morning, so I see the stars. Like this morning I was out and it's dark. I saw the sunrise. I heard the birds sing, and if you pay attention, you can hear one sing and one answer. I saw deer out this morning. And then and sometimes it's just the silence of your breathing or your footsteps. And then people just come to mind. It's not a forced, who am I praying for in mile 1? It's, oh, so-and-so came on my mind, or this person. And so it's where I work out my day's problems. It's where I've been on some runs, I've cried so hard I've had to stop. But it's where I've told people it's my Sabbath time. And so I don't think I need my shoes. I need my running shoes.
Yeah, I like that. I run too, probably not as much as you, but I've always said the hardest step is that first one out the door, and I think prayer is kind of like that too. And so I kind of find running prayerful, or any kind of practice, but it's, if you could just schedule the time, you don't have to have an agenda. You just, you need to get it started. And that's the hard part.
That's the hard part. Yeah.
And then, one step becomes another, and then it becomes a little easier after that. What about you, Art? Do you have any objects or symbols that come to mind that represent your journey of life and faith?
Well, see, I got rid of all the ones that got me in trouble. So what I have left is hiking boots. I like to. My son-in-law laughs at me all the time. I like telling people I haven't run since Reagan, so don't start anytime soon. But I do love being outdoors.
Yeah.
So I'll hike. While she's running 10 miles, I'll hike 6. We usually get done about the same time.
Okay.
But extremely fond of going to the mountains. So like on a weekday, I'd like to go like Hanging Rock, and I've got a couple of special places I like to go to. And there I kind of sit and kind of take in the quiet, watch the birds, do their thing, riding the thermals. And it kind of gives you a feeling that you're very small. God's got control, and you just sit and look at the wonder around you. It's quiet. Very few places you can go that's quiet, and you can feel like you got a feel for being connected. to God. And that's kind of, I've discovered, running the family. All the way back many, many generations, we tend to go to the woods and contemplate or have a spot in nature to go to. And I've had many pastors tell me you need to have a place, even if it's, some of them have a closet in their house that they go and sit, and others have a place outside. Some places dedicated to trying to get that feeling, get that mindset, and that's kind of where we go. She runs, and I go sit in the woods.
Yeah, that's really good. I think kind of pulling away, that's the hard part, you know? And then when you get there, sometimes it seems that questions come up, or it could be a doubt or something you hadn't really thought of because you haven't really slowed down enough to really face what God might be saying to you, or what your life might be saying to you. So are there any of those kind of questions that come up for you that maybe they keep coming up, maybe some doubt or some thing you're like, well, I just can't figure that part out about life or faith? Do you have those kind of things that come up for you when you get in that stillness?
I do. Probably my first major question, and I've reconciled it in my mind, but when I was 18, just before I went to college, my aunt committed suicide. That's hard when you're 18.
Yeah.
Like, ooh, all the questions that come to your mind. But I worked through that and I reconciled that as much as I could. I think now what I struggle with are how can, it's more of a rhetorical question, I guess, how can two people read the same Bible and have 180-degree different views of what it means to be Christ-like in terms of being the hands and feet of Christ, about feeding and loving your neighbor? And I think it's probably my biggest struggle right now in terms of how can I read the Bible and know that I'm supposed to do X, Y, Z, and the person over here is going, well, if you do X, Y, Z, you're doing it all wrong. I'm like, so it's what I struggle with right now in terms of how do we understand what Christ, God, is wanting us to do right now, today, and how do we shake off what we would refer to as false prophets, are people who are wanting to use the name to be glorified, but they just want to be glorified to themselves and not to. So that's what I struggle with. That's probably what I struggle with the most.
Our scripture text yesterday in worship was the one about I think it's 1 Corinthians 12 about the body being unified, and it's just a timeless message, right? Like that, written so long ago, but they were dealing with those same kind of. One person says we should do it this way, and then one person says we should do it this way. But then how do we stay unified amid diversity, which is a good thing. I mean, I would like, whether it's us as friends or in a relationship you bring different things to that relationship. So it's good to have that diversity, but it's hard to kind of live it out, I think.
It is.
Yeah. What kind of questions come up for you, Art?
I guess my largest, deepest irritation, to say the least, was like I said, the death of my father. He died of cancer. Took about 2 years to kill him. And I was 17. This is 1979.
Yeah.
So we're talking a long time. And my aggravation with that was, we've been told we need to serve. And my father did a lot of service, both in the civil society and in the church, as his parents and his parents before them. That's what we do. That's what we did. When church doors were open, he was there Sundays, Wednesdays, special events, whatever. And to die that gruesome, ugly a death, very painful, psychologically draining, really, something of that nature hurts family as much as it does anything else. And then my grandparents went through the same thing 15 years later, nearly identical cancer, multiple years to killed and they lay in waste, and it's just excruciating death. And I've been starting this as my teens and then finishing up in my late 20s. So I had a hard time with what's going on. Why do all this if you're going to die this nasty, ugly death? And then, of course, my mom passed away, 10 years ago?
Eight-ish.
Pretty good while. Multiple strokes. Didn't know where she was at.
Yeah.
Paralyzed, all that. So that kind of resurrected all that stuff again. I pretty much tried to hide it. It didn't do very well. Isabel was in middle school at the time, I guess.
She was.
And that really hurt her a lot. And, when your kid's hurt, you hurt twice. So now it's something that she's experiencing that I experienced. And she's come out the other side a lot better than I have. I mean, I'm 63 now. It's been 40-some years ago. My reconciling is there must have been a purpose somewhere. Don't know where it is. And if by the grace of God I get into heaven, I'm probably not going to care. I'll be just glad to be there.
Right.
Everybody always has a list what they want to ask the Lord when they get there, and it's like, I'm just proud and happy to be here. There's nothing I can do about it anyway. So that's about the best I can reconcile that. But it does gnaw at me quite a bit.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear you both, not even together at that time, but you have these kind of, both like right before you're going to college or finishing high school, you have these people in your life that died, and you're kind of wrestling with suffering and what does that look like? And so it's interesting just to kind of hear both of your stories, how you're very different people, but how like there's some similarities really, and kind of how you came into faith and everything. So it's kind of really amazing in hearing that. So fast forward a few years, maybe you're carrying these questions through all your life, and maybe you will continue, but at some point you end up at this congregation. So First Baptist on Fifth. Why? And
That was me.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
It was me.
Yes, it was you.
It was, we had been at this previous church, and I had started attending that previous church when I was a junior at Wake. As I said, we got married there. Isabel was dedicated there. Isabel was baptized there. And there were just there was some changes going on at the church with some leadership. And I realized that my vision, mission, core values of belonging, of welcoming, were not in alignment with some of the leaders within that church at that time. Not all, but some of the more senior leaders. And I remember coming home one night from a meeting, and I said to Art, I think I need to leave. I think I need the church, that church, that congregation. Yeah. And he said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. And about that time, I started reading about the new pastor here. And I said, I'm going to just go and check things out. I was teaching Sunday school at the time, so I would teach Sunday school at my other church.
And
I would sneak out, and I'd come over here, and I just sat in the pew, and I just felt like my spiritual cup, which was so empty, was slowly getting refilled. And I would come home, and I would talk about it. And Art was very much involved with some things at our other church. And Isabel was a freshman in high school. And she said, Mom, can I come with you one Sunday? And I'm like, absolutely. So she went to Sunday school and then slipped out with me. And but we had gotten connected. I had met Joy Gamble. I had met Mary Foskett. I had met Katie Gamble. I had met, somewhere along the way, I'd met the Knights. And so Isabel just kind of connected in. I think she connected in with you, Kyle, and she connected in with Hannah. She connected in with Daniel. And then Art started coming. And so like one by one, we started coming. And I kid you not, it was one Sunday in church. I'd been coming for about 9 months. And we were all three in the pew on a Sunday morning in February. And Isabel leaned over during the invitational hymn. She says, are we doing this or what? And
Typical Isabel.
off we went down the I mean, like,
Yeah.
Emily didn't even know we were going to walk down the aisle that day. But that's kind of where how we ended up. So it was me, but they all started coming one by one, and I think the sense of my spiritual journey was reawakened here, and I have grown here. I would say Art has grown here. He can talk about that himself, but I think he has grown a lot here. Isabel was coming here after the death of her grandmother. She was kind of going through some things. And I think she felt really included by the youth. It was a small group, but felt very included, to where she still feels like this is her home church, even though she's in Indiana. So that's how we ended up here at first. And I just look at this as my extended family.
Well, let's see. At the time she was at the end of her rope, I was deacon and on 7 committees. I was either a member of a committee or the deacon rep, which, you have a minister rep, and then there they have a deacon rep as well. You got 36 deacons. You got to give them something to do. Other than that, Baptists, we eat well and we kind of talk a little bit, and we need something good. But it's family tradition. Again, you're compelled to do these things, and fewer people are wanting to do stuff like that. So I'm trying to fill in the breach, and quite frankly, I was excruciatingly burned out church, burned out with everything. And I was ready to go, but in true Yates fashion, you finish your commitments.
Yeah.
So I finished out all my terms. Fortunately, all 7 of them came to an end.
Imagine if you were like on this 3-year, like, okay, you finished these 3, now you got 3 more.
Everything
And then
was
this
on a
one.
3-year, and everything just aligned. Okay, December 31st of this year, you're done. It's like, they're all the time. Well, we need to do this. We need to do that. No, I can't do this. I'm taking a big break, and then the big break came sitting in the pew first week of January with my family here. And I had one guy say, "Well, I saw you on TV." I said, "Well, I'm glad you were watching church on TV then." So that's how I got here. The ladies decided this was the place for them, and I knew I wasn't going to be where I was at much longer, other than just being a good back row Baptist for a couple of years. So it took a little while. The class you created was probably the best thing that happened to me in quite a few years. It was time to just sit down with folks and just let's talk for an hour about something meaningful. And it worked, and we're still in that class all these years later.
That's really good. So tell me a little bit about, that's one of our larger classes here at the church. It's been going for a few years now. What are some things that you've, because it's taken different shape probably since it was started almost 10 years ago. So how have you grown along with that class, and what kind of things are you learning now?
I made the comment a couple of weeks ago. We have an embarrassing riches in that class of ministers, academics, as in collegiate academics, both retired and current. Missionaries.
Oh yeah, there's
career missionaries.
Oh, wow.
It's like a great theological talk, which I really like. But it's also a good, meaningful beginning and good, meaningful ending, and you get a lot more rich context. You get a lot more experience from other folks. It's just excruciatingly well-rounded. It's like she's asked me several times, "Are we going to Sunday school?" Well, I don't know what you're doing, but I'm going to be going there. I mean, I can listen to these folks. It's just fantastically well done. I mean, it's probably the best thing. We've done a lot of Bible study, but also a lot of good books to study as well. And a lot of them I've read multiple times after being explained to this knucklehead what some things are, and then rereading it again. It's that class has meant everything to me. The teaching, we have Joy Gamble is extraordinary at organizing anything and everything. I mean, she is our glue. She keeps us together, and since the beginning, I mean, the whole concept was fantastic.
Yeah,
I appreciate you doing that for us, because you had the first group. You had a lot of people that were disillusioned.
we
All
did.
from the same thing.
Yeah.
See this wonderful thing you created.
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't think about like all these delusioned people. I just thought, oh, hey, here's some people that want to connect, and I didn't even remember it. But like Joy mentioned that to me. Like I think whenever it was me and Kathy who started it, and I think Kathy, she does some interim pastor work right now, but is part of that class. But she's been out for a little bit. But I would send out just a weekly email, kind of checking in. Hey, this is what we talking about Sunday. And then I'd kind of send a little prayer or something. I didn't even remember doing that, but Joy remembers that. And now she's kind of continued that on, because I'll get like these messages from your class where like, hey, this person's going through this. Can you be praying for them? This person's doing this. And just that kind of care, I think really, we live in a society where a lot of people are very lonely, and like to have that kind of group it's pretty amazing. Yeah. Whether it's your class or some other class that we have here, but that community part's amazing.
You often wonder how people that don't have that make it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We've been extraordinarily blessed here at First on Fifth, and I see a lot of folks that are struggling. Yeah, they go to church an hour a week, but they don't really get anything out of it. They're going through the motions. Been there, understand that. And to be able to get something to hold on to for the whole week, and then to get involved is the biggest thing. Get involved in your church.
Mm-hmm.
It brings more blessings to you than I can describe, even if it's painting.
Well, and I think one thing about the Sunday school class is that people can be vulnerable and authentic. Mm-hmm. They can ask a question and not feel like people are looking at them going, they're a Christian and they asked what question? We're all like, oh, that's a really good question. Or I hadn't thought of it from that angle. So the vulnerability and the authenticity that each of us can share in there. And I can remember a few years ago, Isabel was a junior at college, and she was going through a really difficult year. It was one of her hardest academic years. She was in a terrible roommate situation. And I reached out to like 6 people and just said, Isabel's having a really difficult time right now. She's struggling with XYZ. Will you all pray for her? And I thought to myself, I would not have done that at my previous church, because to admit that you're struggling with something, maybe you're not a strong enough Christian. Mm-hmm. And I think the reception I got from that, I sent her a note, I texted her, it was just overwhelming. And for a mom whose daughter was 600 miles away, that just made me feel so much. It made me feel loved.
Mm-hmm. Simple act of sending a card.
Mm-hmm.
She would get lots of cards at college, from people she knew had reached out to her while she was here as a teenager, and that meant the world
Huge.
to her. Very large. People don't understand these little small things do go a whole lot further in ministry or in caring for the flock than big grandiose attention grabbers, what I call them. It's the small things that really matter.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, it's amazing to be able to be yourself, and then even if you're wrong, something, and then somebody says, I'm here with you.
Yeah, I'm here with you.
And I don't have any expectation for you that you need to believe this, you need to look like this, or any of that. Just say, I love you for who you are, And I think that's something that this church is really trying to live into, and I think y'all are 2 examples of that. Kind of as a way to kind of wrap it up and close it, what gives you hope right now? Whether that be here at First Baptist on Fifth or that you see around you, what gives you hope?
I think of something, actually, Kyle, you said at one of the last business meetings that you were attending before you left, before you came back. Mm-hmm. And you said something to the effect of, it's nice to see the positive membership enrollment at the church, because I think we had gone through a period where, and I thought to myself recently, I'm like, wonder what Kai would say now, 106 new members. And, so two things excite me right now. The growth, not just growth, is that I think that when I see families, young couples, singles coming into our church now, and they're immediately getting involved, it's very hopeful to know that people here in our community are feeling a connection here, and maybe they didn't know where else to go or where else they wanted to feel a connection. So I think that's a very hopeful thing right now in the world where we are. I'm excited about the building campaign. Okay, I think it's an opportunity to show we're growing instead of tearing down. We're trying to build, and not a lot of churches are doing that right now. So those two things it makes me excited about being here at First on Fifth.
Yeah, it's the younger folks picking up, because it's not really popular to be in church. It's not the thing. And the fact that I'm downstairs and I'm painting new rooms that haven't been used in, 5 years, getting them cleaned up because new Sunday school classes, Bible study, being started in both age-related and just kind of diversity of people getting together to start a new class. I mean, that's what gets me excited. And we have a couple in our neighborhood. They go to another church. One's a minister, and she's like a campus director or whatever. And they've got a 1-year-old. And to see them, they're walking through a neighborhood, and they're always smiling. And when they do the same thing Terri does, when they're off walking around, they're in prayer, they're in thought. You can see that on their face as they go motoring by our house, and they are so uplifting. And we've got so many people just like that joining our church. Have a generation that seems to have grasped upon what we did years ago. It's like they're going to not only add to the legacy, but they're going to be able to extend into the next generation. And it's our job at our point in time to support them, just like we were supported, and the ones that supported the people that supported us, to continue this legacy. And that gives me hope to see that the younger folks are picking it up and taking it serious and living out what they feel their part of this mission is. 2,000-year-old mission. Keep going.
Well, Art and Terri, thank you so much for sharing a conversation today. Thank you for tuning in to the Life Together podcast. To listen to previous episodes, you can find them on our website, firstonfifth.org, or wherever you get your podcast. We'll see you next week.